we don't know the value that data is generating or the potential value of data. And therefore, we're not managing it well. And because we're not managing it as well as we can, we're not monetizing it well. So this is kind of a vicious cycle for organizations.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. I am Drishti, and I would like to begin with just a quick intro of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform, available across 14 channels with 30,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by INC, Tech World, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 300,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest, Douglas Laney leads the data and analytics strategy practice with the consultancy Caserta. Formerly, he was a vice president and distinguished analyst with Gartner's Chief Data Officer Research and Advisory Practice. He's an accomplished practitioner and recognized authority on data and analytics strategy, and is a 3-time recipient of Gartner's annual Thought Leadership Award, and is regularly considered as one of the top global influencers in these topics. Mr. Laney specializes in and assists organizations with data monetization and valuation, open and syndicated data, data governance, and big data-based innovation. In 2001, he coined the 3 V's of volume, velocity, and variety, now commonly used in big data. So welcome, Douglas. We are really happy to have you on Engati CX.
Thank you, Drishti. Very good to be with you.
So I would like to begin with the very first question that we have, that what is data-driven innovation? And can you give us and the audience a real-life example around that?
Sure. So I think it's fairly simple that data-driven innovation is really about creating new value streams from data. So it's not just about AI or the technology side of things. It's about what are we doing with data? How are we using data to drive business value in ways that perhaps we haven't before? So that's really what the innovation is about. And we can generate those value streams internally. So we can use data to improve business process performance. We can use data to improve the way we're targeting markets. We can use data to understand markets and open up new marketplaces. We can use data to identify new product or service or offering opportunities. We can use data to reduce expenses. So those are all the ways that we can use data internally. And there certainly are innovative ways to do so. And then there are ways to use data more externally as an actual product itself or a service itself. And we can talk about a few of the ways to do that. Over the years, I have compiled a library or a compendium of over 500 ways that organizations are using data and analytics in innovative and high-value ways. And when I've done a bit of a meta-analysis of those use cases, I find that they sort of break down into sort of 8 patterns or so in the way that organizations are using data innovatively, internally, and externally. So you were looking for some examples. So I have a few of my favorite examples from that I've included in my book. One of them is from Walmart, and Walmart had a very successful, good search engine, right? And their search engine, people would type into the search bar what they were looking for, and the search engine would help them find the product that they wanted. And it took into account 45 million searches per month, I think it was. And it was pretty smart, search engine. But what they realized one week was that the search engine there was a particular search term that people were searching for that resulted in a very high degree of shopping cart abandonment. And that search term was the word house, right? And so the search engine was taking them to housing goods or housewares or even dog houses, right? But what people were looking for was not that at all. The search happened to coincide with that week, the season premiere of the medical television drama House. If you remember Dr. House, familiar with that show. Yeah. was premiering, and what people were looking for, of course, was the box DVD set of the previous seasons. So what Walmart realized was that their search engine was not taking into consideration, was only looking at its own data, was not taking into consideration what was trending in the world and what was happening in the world. And so they upgraded the search engine to also consider trends on Facebook and Twitter and elsewhere. And when they upgraded the search engine and released it, they realized that they had reduced shopping cart abandonment by 10 to 15% across the board. And in Walmart, terms, that's like $1 billion a year. Right? There's also some other innovative ways. I'll share a couple more examples if you like. One of them is from the manufacturing company Lockheed Martin, which makes military airplanes and so forth. And I spoke once at a conference years ago about the concept of dark data that is unutilized or underutilized, and maybe just used for a single purpose, like an operational purpose, and then used for one analytic purpose, maybe just like reporting on it. And so I was speaking on the concept of dark data, and one of the people in the audience asked, what dark data does my company have? And he was a CIO with one of the big 4 consulting firms. And I said, well, you're probably, just off the top of my head, sitting on probably years or maybe a decade or more of archived emails. And your business is running successful projects. And invariably, there are issues that come up on those projects related to scope or budget or personnel or technology-related issues. I said, and those issues are evidenced by the project communications among those people in the emails and whatnot. And I'm not suggesting that you spy on your people, but look for those kinds of terms related to, train a system to look for those kinds of terms that are related to project issues on previous projects, and then deploy that on current projects to identify where there are certain kinds of yellow flags and red flags. And lo and behold, a year or two later, I learned that Lockheed Martin applied that technique on their projects. They analyze project communications and other project documentation on these large projects like building fighter jets, and are able now to identify project issues 3 times faster or earlier than they used to be able to, and are saving hundreds of millions of dollars a year on cost overruns. So that's another one of my favorite examples. I can go on. I have lots of examples if you want a couple more. Those are a couple of my favorite ones. There are also companies that sell data, itself. So there's a company called the Dollar Store, one of those, Dollar General, one of those dollar stores. And they use data internally to identify where when they should open and close stores. They open and close all the stores across the country at the same time, right? And then they realize, well, maybe they shouldn't be open. They should open and close them at different times based on the local population and demographics. And so they did that and ended up making a lot more money, through that analysis. But then they realized that their consumer packaged good partners would find this data valuable, and so they sell access to this inventory, sales data, shopping basket data, pricing, and so forth. And they now have a self-funding data warehouse. The data warehouse pays for itself because they're offering this subscription to this data to their suppliers. So, yeah, lots of other fun and interesting examples.
Yeah, those are like really, really good ones. And when such huge companies can benefit, so I guess data is something that people should look out for. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And you'll notice when you look at these examples, many of them rely on not just internal data, but external data. So there's some interesting kind of trends that I see that the most innovative uses of data typically will use external data. There are 5,000 or more data brokers out there selling data, aggregating and selling data. There are tens of millions of data sets published by government organizations around the world, both national and local data organizations. There are There's data that you can gather from partners and suppliers and other businesses throughout your ecosystem. There's data you can harvest from social media streams. There's data you can harvest from websites. And so, I find that a lot of these examples will leverage that external data, but they're also very functionally specific. They're focused on a particular business problem. They're not, let's just build a big data warehouse and see what happens. They're focused on a particular problem or opportunity. And so they're very vocational or functionally specific that way. So those are some of the trends that we see.
How do you think, how important is data becoming in these days, and how will organizations utilize these vast amounts of data in different functions as well?
Well, data is becoming the asset, and it's not just you talk about the size of data, right? It's not just the volume of data that's important. You talked about the 3 V's that I came up with almost 20 years ago now, and people were very fixated on, and still are fixated on, the size of data. We've got gigabytes, we've got terabytes, we've got exabytes of data, right? And it's really one of the things that I find in the most innovative ways that organizations are using data is they involve multiple data sets. It's not just analyzing a single data set, but it's superimposing data on each other to identify interesting intersections or patterns or opportunities. And so it's also the velocity of data, because data is streaming from devices now, and data is captured much more quickly than an individual or human can analyze it. And then it's also, like I said, that variety of data, superimposing multiple data sets. So the 3 V's are a nice way to kind of think about and frame what your focus is for data, but don't get fixated on the volume of data. It's really the variety of data and the velocity of data are the biggest opportunities today and the biggest challenges for organizations as well. So you asked about how are companies utilizing this data? Well, there certainly are architectural and technical challenges in collecting and harvesting all of this data. One of the things I notice in organizations is that almost every company has someone who is responsible for, or an entire department responsible for procuring raw materials or even office supplies like paper clips. Right? And so you have an entire department of people who are procuring office supplies, but not a single person who is procuring data supplies. And so when we think about the value of external data and the importance of what's called sometimes called alternative data, I think it's really important to have someone who is in a role that is curating, identifying external data assets, figuring out how to get access to them, how to license them, potentially how to integrate them, what their value proposition is, assessing their quality and their completeness, and other quality characteristics. And I think it's a tremendous mistake for organizations to not have someone designated to identifying external data assets. So, but you asked really about how important data is becoming. I mean, it's really a substitute for a lot of traditional things. It's becoming a substitute for inventory. It's a substitute for transportation. It's a substitute for physical products. So we see, the manifestation of digital products, and it's even, as we're doing right now, it is a substitute for physical presence. As much as I'd like to be there with you right now and meeting and shaking your hand and interviewing in person, this information that's traveling over Zoom right now is a replacement or a substitute for physical presence. So I think companies need to really look at all of the physical things that they do today and how data can be think of data as a substitute for them. Yeah.
That's actually a very different thought process when coming to how to utilize or how data is important, because now that you told me these 3 examples, I got started thinking that, okay, yeah, this might be like a substitute thing nobody thought about. So That's
Yeah, there are different ways of thinking about data innovation. You can think about it as a substitute. You can. I go through exercises with companies on generating hypotheses. So we look at kind of the three advanced styles of analytics: diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive analytics,
Right.
and then look at the different business functions, whether they're operations, management, HR, legal, sales and marketing, and so forth, and then create somewhat of a matrix. And so for each intersection of diagnostic and, say, sales and marketing, what is a crunchy question or a chewy question that we could be asking that perhaps we're not asking today to diagnose something about sales and marketing? And that will lead us down a path of exploring, okay, what data do we have to be able to potentially answer that question, or what data is available externally to help us address that question. So I run what I call data monetization or information innovation workshops, and we use a variety of techniques to elicit some some kind of lateral thinking on ways to use data. And one of those is to explore the extended business ecosystem. So it's not only how are we going to use data, but how can we make data valuable to our business partners or other organizations, our suppliers, our suppliers, our customers, our partners. And so you need to think more broadly about the business ecosystem, especially when considering the ways to use data externally.
When we talk about data coming in use more and more, so what do you think are the future trends that will strongly be data dependent and will change how these traditional business processes work?
Well, one of the trends we're seeing right now due to the pandemic is interesting, a little bit of doublespeak here, but one of the trends is companies getting away from trend-based forecasting. So most companies will do forecasting based on looking at their own historical data. What did we sell last month? What did we sell last year? How fast are we growing? Things like that. What are maybe some new ways that our customers are using our products and services, looking at some more internal trends. But with a shock to the economy like COVID, companies' forecasts are broken. Okay, they just don't apply. They're irrelevant. Now. And so one of the trends is to move away from trend-based forecasting toward more driver-based forecasting. Driver being what is driving my business externally, what behaviors or trends or demographics or macro or micro economic things are happening that are affecting my business. And that's a major shift for organizations to make from just kind of staring at their own navels, right? And then changing those forecast models to look more externally at what are the leading indicators, the drivers of their business. Now, some companies have done this to some degree already, but I think right now there's a real imperative to do so. I also see a big trend toward digital products and services, and that's something that certainly is going to continue. Data is a major part of any kind of digital product or service. And I think it's an imperative for organizations to explore any kind of product or service that they offer today and how they can either infuse that product or service with information to make it that much more valuable, or perhaps replace that product or service or create an alternative version of it that can be accessed and consumed in a digital way. Yeah. So that's a big trend as well. Obviously, there are trends in technology that make data much more consumable and usable. Trends like AI and automation. I'm trying to think what other kinds of trends we're seeing. We're also seeing digital natives, right, becoming executives, right. And whereas folks more kind of my generation didn't necessarily grow up with data, people were encouraged to make decisions. Using more gut instinct, right, than available data. I think the new generation of business executives, business leaders, and senior executives are going to be digital natives and people who expect to have data at their fingertips to make decisions, or even have systems make decisions, kind of more decisions for them. And I see the day we talk a lot about, and people are very excited by self-driving automobiles, right? And if you kind of extrapolate on that idea, you could envision a day where there is a self-driving company, a self-driving business, where it is taking all sorts of data inputs and using analytics to automatically make decisions, to automate business processes, everything from HR and talent acquisition to talent management. I remember back when I was at Gartner, one of our favorite trends from a couple of years ago was the number of people who will ultimately be working for a robo-boss at some point. Yeah, and that's a uncomfortable thing for, again, people of my generation to think about. Perhaps not so for millennials or Gen Xers, right? So. So I think that that's a trend that we'll see. I think we're pretty close in some industries, like trading companies, stock trading companies, very much operate in an automated, autonomous way, and they're getting very close to that vision of a self-driving organization.
Yeah, that's true. But
even folks like Amazon, right? They when they used to move, when they created a new distribution center, they had to move products from the old distribution center to the new distribution center, and they used to do that manually. They had people move them onto pallets and move the pallets onto trucks, and then have the trucks drive to the new distribution center. Now they use robots for that, and they reprogram these robots to automatically gather up all of the pallets and products and move them onto a truck, and then take them off the truck and distribute them throughout the new distribution center, and automatically catalog where those products are. And they've been able to reduce the time from moving from an old distribution center to a new distribution center from months now to a matter of days.
What happens is that now humans can concentrate more on intelligent tasks and not of repetitive or
more on the creative tasks. So I still think there's room for human intelligence in creative tasks, but very quickly we find computers creating art and creating music, right? And or even evaluating creative tasks. Like there are algorithms right now that can advise winemakers on how to improve the quality of their wine and the price that they'll be able to get for it. There are algorithms that will analyze a movie or film script, right, and estimate the dollar value of revenue from that film based on inserting certain levels of actors into those roles. And so so those kinds of decisions can be somewhat automated, or at least supported.
Currently, like that the movie review that you were talking about, so I have seen this one video where AI just does a summary of the Harry Potter movies, and currently what we see is that when they do that movie review, they do not think emotionally like we do. So when at least millennials would be very close to what Harry Potter is. So when I see that movie, I feel emotional. But when AI does the same thing, it is very true, and it is so funny that it comes out to me. So I guess that technology might be a bit far away when coming to emotional or intent based thing. But of course, a lot many tasks it can complete very much easily.
All right. Yeah.
So how do you think that these technologies are making meaning out of the data, which is helping in the decision making?
Well, the technologies we see, are artificial intelligence and machine learning and automation are probably the two big ones that are making value out of data. AI and machine learning for decision making, right? So, traditionally, a lot of people were very comfortable using Excel and building pretty pie charts and bouncy bar charts and dashing dashboards, right? We do that stuff all day long, and we're comfortable with that. But when I look across all of the use cases that I've collected, these hundreds of use cases, almost none of them make use of are based on some pie chart analysis. They're all based on more diagnostic, advanced analytics used to diagnose something, to predict something, or to even prescribe some kind of action. And you can't do that just with the most basic, BI tools or analytics tools. You need to get into that realm of machine learning and automation in order to make that happen. So for something like prescriptive analytics, if it's just decision making, you can use AI or machine learning to generate recommendations, right, of what to do to improve something. If it's more of an operational decision, then you could also layer automation on top of that to automatically order inventory or automatically maintain, equipment or something like that, right? But generally, for decision making, you're looking at AI and machine learning that takes into consideration, what's happened in the past and external data as well, ideally, and you'll get some more intelligent over time. The challenge has always been, when new situations arise, like COVID and the economic situation, how do those kinds of technologies respond, and how quickly do they respond? How quickly do we want them to be able to respond to aberrations in events like that? And then also there's a big question around bias. How do we teach these kinds of artificial intelligence technologies to not perpetuate the bias that was used to train them in the first place, and or to recognize bias and eliminate it. So there's a whole field and study of work around that right now.
Yeah. But currently, I guess in the predictive analysis model, what we do is we give weights to some of the factors that we would like the AI to consider more. So currently what we have is that bias-based training which comes out to in the predictive analytics. But I guess that is needed for the AI to understand on how we want to measure those factors as well.
Yeah, right. So there's a whole field of study around data ethics, data-related ethics. And in fact, when I run these information innovation workshops for clients, once we generate a body of ideas using some of those techniques that I mentioned before, we run them through a feasibility assessment. And there are 10 feasibility factors we look at, and one of those is ethical feasibility. What could go wrong? How could this idea be misused? Or how could this idea, if we implemented it, create an uncomfortable situation for our customers and then ultimately for us.
So any other thoughts or tips that you would like to share with the audience about using data in their business processes?
Sure. We could go on all day. Let me share something that I've been researching for a while. This concept of infonomics and the economics of information. One of the big challenges I think companies have, and I generated this hypothesis. I came up with this hypothesis over the years of working with companies, and I find that they just don't manage their data particularly well. They certainly don't manage it with the same kind of discipline as they manage their physical assets or their financial assets. Yet everybody is running around talking about information as an asset. But I find most companies don't treat their data as an asset, at all. They certainly don't apply asset management principles and practices the way that they do to their physical assets or their financial assets, or even their human capital, the way they manage their talent. And I think that the problem with that, the root cause of that goes back to that data is not a balance sheet asset. It's not something that we record on the balance sheets. The current accounting standards don't allow companies to report publicly on the value of their data. There are no methods for it. There are no standards for it. And in fact, several years ago, the accounting profession put its foot down and said, no, you cannot value data on your balance sheet only under certain rare circumstances. And because companies don't measure their data, they're in a poor position to manage it well. The old adage, you can't manage what you don't measure, or you can't manage well what you don't measure well. And so I think that's the reason why companies don't manage their data with the same kind of rigor that they manage their other assets. And then it follows that you can't monetize what you're not managing well. And so because data is something that isn't managed well, it has quality issues, it has availability issues, and that it's not driving as much value for organizations as it could. It's not being used in economically beneficial ways. So this becomes kind of a vicious cycle for organizations, because one of the properties of data is that using data creates more data. Whenever we're using data, we're typically in a position to create more data. So, for example, going back to the Walmart example, whenever somebody types something in the search bar and it finds them or doesn't find what they're looking for, it learns over time, and so more data is created. I think that so this becomes kind of a vicious cycle. We don't know the value that data is generating, or the potential value of data, and therefore we're not managing it well. And because we're not managing it as well as we can, we're not monetizing it well. So this is kind of a vicious cycle for organizations. And the idea behind Infonomics is to reverse that curse, or flip the script, and encourage companies to measure the value of their data as if it were a balance sheet asset, or measure it in different ways, measure its quality characteristics, its business impact, its impact on key performance indicators, and then be in a better position to use that to get budget and resources to manage data as an asset. And in doing so, you're in a better position to innovate with it. So, so I think that's my final thought on that, is to encourage companies to start measuring the value of their data, and that will lead to better ways to manage it and better ways to innovate with it.
That is something that companies should think about, at least now when they are suffering from COVID. Then data might help in enhancing the business processes that they are going to take. So, yeah.
For sure.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
It's a real pleasure being with you today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The same pleasure. And I guess the audience is also really going to enjoy this interview and the examples and the tips that you have shared, and might follow them as well.
All right. Well, keep well, keep safe, keep well.
Yeah.
Everyone.
So we'll be back with a new episode with a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned, and we'll see you around for the next run.